My name is Samuel Carver, and I'm 42 years old. It might not seem like it, but I have one of the most critical jobs on the planet. I'm not a head of state or some brilliant medical researcher, but my work is far more essential. I'm a mix of a medical professional, a historical scholar, and a soldier all rolled into one. I am a hunter of monsters. This isn't the kind of career you can apply for online or find listed in the classifieds. There's no formal education for it, no official uniform or special badge. But this work is as real as it gets. It's incredibly dangerous, and most people will never even know we exist. I grew up in California's Orange County, a land of sun surfboards, endless traffic, and shopping centers. For a while, my life was completely ordinary. I rode my bicycle to school, spent time with friends, and enjoyed those long, hot summer days at the beach. My mother was a nurse, and my father managed a small hardware store. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. Even as a child, I was always more interested in books than sports, especially tales about the mysterious and the macabre. I'd spend hours at the library pulling down those forgotten, dusty books filled with folklore accounts of ghost sightings and strange disappearances. Unbeknownst to me, I was already preparing for the life I would lead. I didn't believe every word I read, but I felt a deep sense of truth in some of them. I could feel it in my very bones. There were things out there that no one dared to talk about. After high school, I went to a good college in the city. I first studied history, then switched to medicine, excelling in both. I thought my future would be in a classroom as a teacher, or perhaps a hospital. But then an event occurred that changed everything. It's a story I rarely tell. It took place in a small town not far from here, and involved an entire family of vampires who had been living secretly among us. That experience was the turning point. It was then that I truly understood that monsters were not just old myths. They were tangible, physical, and a very real danger. They lived alongside us completely unnoticed. The story of how I survived that encounter is for another time, but it pulled me into this life. I never chose it, it chose me. And I've been doing this ever since. The reality of being a monster hunter is nothing like the movies. It's not about epic battles and dramatic soundtracks. It's not running around with crosses and wooden stakes. Most of my time is spent on meticulous paperwork, in-depth research, careful planning, and silent surveillance. You have to learn every possible detail about a creature before you even think about making a move. If you charge in blindly, you'll be dead in an instant. I've survived for 2 decades by being cautious, by learning from every experience, and by never forgetting a lesson. Lately, I find myself haunted by memories I can't shake, which is why I've started this journal to document stories from my work. Remember the people I don't want to forget and the creatures I wish I could. I'm also writing down the rules and lessons I've gathered along the way. If you're reading this, maybe it will help you someday too. This journal is a record of my life, my work, my failures, my hard-won knowledge, and the monsters I've faced. When I eventually retire, I'll leave it with the Institute. It will be stored deep within their archives, maybe gathering dust, but hopefully someone like me will discover it and find something within these pages that saves their life. My name is Samuel Carver, and I hunt the things that go bump in the night. These are my stories. One of my earliest missions wasn't an official assignment. I stumbled into it by pure chance about 5 years into the job. By some standards, I was still a novice, but I'd learned enough to stay alive and wasn't afraid to venture into the dark and unknown. I was deep in the Appalachian mountains, tracking some ancient spirit with a name I couldn't even pronounce, a creature from Cherokee myths that could move through the trees faster than any animal. I never did find it though. I got sidetracked, which, as it turns out, happens more often than you'd think. It's a long-standing custom for hunters to check in with the local ranger stations or fire lookouts when we're in a national park. It's not just for safety, it's because most of the rangers are aware of our world. They know what we are and what we do. They don't ask many questions, and in return, we keep them informed if anything strange is happening in their territory. I have a lot of respect for these people. The public sees them as little more than trail guides, but they're the first line of defense against monsters. Whether people know it or not, many of these rangers have seen things they'll never speak of, things they desperately wish weren't real. The station I stopped at was small, a wooden lodge nestled among the trees, rather than a typical government building. It had a wraparound porch, a stone chimney, and 2 flags flying out front, one for the state and one for the Forest Service. I went in expecting a brief conversation and a few handshakes before I continued on my way. But the moment I opened the door, I knew something was wrong. The air inside was heavy and still, like everyone had been holding their breath for too long. A few rangers stood near the main desk, their bodies tense and alert. But what truly caught my attention was the couple in the center of the room. They were sitting on the floor beside a pile of folded blankets. The woman wasn't just crying. She was sobbing uncontrollably, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking so violently she couldn't be still. The man had one arm around her trying to comfort her, but I could see he was barely holding himself together. His face was pale, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. He wasn't crying, but he was clearly not okay. An older ranger, maybe in his 50s with gray sideburns and tired eyes, saw me and quickly walked over, pulling me away from the family. We'd met before on a different case involving a cave system and unexplained moving lights. "Carver, I didn't expect to see you here," he said. "Just passing through." "What's going on?" I asked. He glanced back at the couple and leaned in close. "Their son is missing. Jameson, 9 years old. He vanished off the trail near Rattlesnake Ridge a couple of hours ago," he explained. I waited, knowing that alone wasn't enough to warrant my involvement. The ranger sighed and rubbed the back of his neck before continuing. "The father says he saw something take him, a creature about 9 feet tall with gray, rough skin like tree bark. It had big arms and even bigger hands. He swears it looked like a troll." I didn't respond immediately. Trolls aren't native to this region. Sure, you might find them in Scandinavia or other old countries, but not in the Appalachian Mountains. If one was here, something was terribly wrong. "Was he certain?" I asked. The ranger nodded once. "He said he was 100 feet away and saw the entire thing. He said it just grabbed the kid and walked into the woods like the boy weighed nothing. The father tried to chase after it and even shoot at it, but it was too fast. He lost it." "And no one else saw the creature?" I inquired. "No one else was close enough," he replied. "But they found broken trees and uprooted stumps, and the footprints are huge." "How big?" I asked. He pointed to a nearby floor tile. "About that wide." My mind quickly calculated the size. That was definitely not human. "Where's the rest of your team?" I asked. He shook his head. "They're already out there searching, but the woods are too dense. If this thing doesn't want to be found, well, you know how that goes." I did. I looked over at the parents again. The mother was still shaking, and the father now had both arms around her, trying desperately to keep her from falling apart. Beside them was a small backpack, a kid's pack, blue with a worn Spider-Man patch sewn on the front. In that moment, I made my decision. I didn't need an official assignment or clearance. I just nodded to the ranger. "Show me the trail," I said, and that's how it all began. The ranger led me out the back of the lodge and toward a narrow dirt path that disappeared into the forest. We walked in silence, our boots crunching on dead leaves and gravel. The sun was still visible, but it was fading quickly. In the woods, that meant darkness would descend sooner than you'd expect. "We call this the Ridge Trail," the ranger explained. "It loops around the western edge, maybe 4 miles long. The family's campsite was in a clearing halfway through." "Any idea how far the creature got?" I asked. He shook his head. "The trail cameras are useless. Whatever took the boy moved low and fast, like it knew where to avoid being seen. Our guys found some tracks, but they just stop after a while, like it walked right into the ground." That sounded right. Trolls aren't intelligent in the conventional sense, but they are masters of survival and know how to stay hidden. The camp was eerily quiet when we arrived. A single blue tent, the kind you buy at any outdoor store, stood in the clearing. A fold-out chair and a half-cooked meal were still on a camping stove, untouched. The ranger pointed toward a disturbed patch of dirt near the tree line. That's where the father saw it, said Jameson was picking flowers, turned to put them in a jar, and when he looked back, the boy was gone and something huge was stomping into the woods. I knelt beside the patch. The footprints were deep, several inches wider than my boot. Whatever it was incredibly heavy. My eyes followed the jagged path they cut through the ferns and underbrush. Then I noticed something else, a torn piece of red fabric caught on a low branch. I carefully plucked it and turned it over in my hand. It was a strip from a child's jacket. "He's heading north," I said, standing up. The ranger nodded grimly. "We'll continue to comb the area. You want backup?" "No. If it's a troll, you'd only slow me down." "No offense," I replied. "None taken," he said. I gave him a pat on the shoulder and stepped into the woods. Tracking at night is a completely different challenge. You have to move slower, listen more intently, and pay attention to details most people would miss. A crushed mushroom, bent blades of grass, the sudden silence of a bird's song. I followed the trail for about an hour. It wasn't easy. The troll had a strange, wide gait, but was light on its feet at the edges. I found broken branches, scraped bark, and once a small smear of blood on a rock. It was enough to tell me I was getting close. Then I heard it, a low rhythmic sound coming from ahead. Not a growl, not breathing, but humming. Trolls love to hum. It's not a song, more of a slow rhythm they keep when they're thinking about food when they're waiting. I moved even more carefully now, one foot in front of the other. The humming grew louder, and then I saw the pit. It was hidden behind a thick tangle of roots and moss, about 10 feet wide and 6 feet deep, lined with stones and wet leaves. At the bottom, curled up in the mud, was the boy Jameson. He was alive, but his face was a mask of terror. His hands were tied in front of him with some kind of fibrous vine. His face was streaked with dirt, and his eyes were red from crying, but he was breathing. About 10 feet away, the troll sat on a rock. It was massive, at least 13 feet tall, with skin like cracked concrete. Its back was hunched and its long arms hung almost to the ground. Its nose was fat and bulbous, and its mouth was open just enough to reveal teeth like broken gravestones. It hadn't seen me yet. It was sharpening its claws on a rock, dragging them back and forth with a dry scraping sound. Every few strokes it hummed. I checked my belt. No weapons, no traps. I'd packed for a scouting trip, not a rescue. All I had was a pocket knife, a small emergency flare, and a net I'd thrown in my bag at the last minute, laced with old wolfsbane. It would have to be enough. I cautiously moved behind a tree, got the net ready, and pulled the flare from my jacket. I counted to 3, then lit it and threw it hard at a pile of dry brush to the troll's right. The flare exploded with a loud crack and a brilliant flash of light. The troll roared, staggering to its feet and covering its ears. I ran. In 3 steps, I was at the edge of the pit. "Jameson, look at me!" I hissed. He blinked up at me, dazed. I jumped down, cut his bonds, hoisted him onto my shoulder, and scrambled back out. He held on tightly, not saying a word, just clinging to me, as if he might disappear again. The troll was still stumbling, growling, and disoriented. I threw the net. It hit its shoulders and clung to them like wet cloth. The wolfsbane worked instantly, burning its skin and slowing its movements. It howled, swatting at the net and stumbling in circles. We didn't stick around to watch. I carried Jameson back through the woods, mile after mile, until I saw the first flicker of lantern light through the trees. When we reached the lodge, his mother screamed his name and ran to us, his father right behind her. They took him from my arms and held him as if they would never let him go again. Jameson didn't speak that night. He just held on to his parents. I gave them a nod. They were crying and thanking me repeatedly. I didn't say much, I never do in these situations. I just made sure the boy was safe. Gave the ranger a quick report and started to pack my things. The next morning, I filed my report with the Institute. I told them everything about the troll, the boy, and the pit in the woods. I left nothing out. They weren't happy. Technically, I had violated protocol. I wasn't supposed to engage without clearance, and I certainly wasn't supposed to go in without backup. The Institute has rules for a reason. Hunters who go rogue often don't come back. I was sanctioned for it, a minor reprimand. Not suspended, but close. I hated it, but I accepted it. The important thing wasn't my punishment, it was what I had discovered. Trolls do not belong in Appalachia. That is not their natural habitat. The fact that one had shown up there meant something was very wrong somewhere else. A few weeks later, the Institute confirmed it. Monsters were migrating. Not just trolls, but other creatures too. Creatures that hadn't been seen in decades or even centuries were appearing in places they shouldn't be. Some were crossing borders, others were crossing oceans. The reasons for this were unclear. Some scientists blame rising temperatures, lost habitats, or disrupted hunting grounds. Others weren't so sure. They suspected it might be something else, something much older and bigger. No one had the answers yet, but everyone agreed on one thing: whatever was happening was just the beginning. My next case was about 7 years after the troll incident. I was in Louisiana for a wedding, a civilian event for an old college friend. I wasn't there on a job, at least not at first. I just wanted to enjoy some good food, listen to live jazz, and have a drink that wasn't from a bottle shaped like a novelty. You don't get many breaks in this line of work, so when one comes, you take it. Besides, I've always liked New Orleans. It's a strange city in the best possible way. Music is everywhere, people dance in the streets, and lanterns sway over narrow balconies. But beneath all that, just below the surface, there's something else. Magic lives here. Real magic. Not the sleight of hand kind, but the kind that lingers in alleyways, arrives with the fog, and listens when you speak its name. Voodoo is a part of it, of course, but it runs much deeper than that. Some places simply breathe the supernatural. New Orleans doesn't just breathe it, it sings it. I was only supposed to be in town for 4 days. 2 for the wedding, 1 to recover, and 1 for good measure. But on the second day, the association sent me a message, a local case urgent and a personal request. I don't usually take jobs while I'm off the clock, but when someone specifically asks for you, you don't ignore it. The message was brief, just a name, a location, and a single sentence. Kellyanne needs your help. I had heard of Kellyanne. She was a jazz singer, the kind of artist who could silence an entire room with her voice. She performed at a small club on the edge of the French Quarter, an old place with a wooden stage, soft lighting, and velvet curtains. I'd been there once or twice on previous trips. Her voice had a way of stopping time itself. I arrived at the club after hours. It was closed, the lights dimmed. Someone let me in through a side door. Kellyanne was sitting at the bar, a glass of bourbon in her hand and a scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. She looked exhausted, not just physically, but bone-deep tired, as if something had been taken from her, and she didn't know if she'd ever get it back. "You're Carver?" she asked, her voice thin. I nodded and took the stool beside her. "That's right. You asked for me." She gave a weak smile. "They said you handle unusual problems." "That's an understatement," I replied. She didn't laugh. She just sipped her drink, then pulled the scarf away from her neck. Her throat looked normal, but when she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm losing my voice, not from being sick. It's like something's taking it." I leaned in closer. "Start from the beginning." She told me everything. It had started 2 weeks earlier. After a show, a stranger approached her. He was a handsome, soft-spoken man with a voice like smooth smoke. He said he was in the music business and could help her become a star. He'd said he could make things happen. She'd heard that line before, but there was something about him she found easy to trust. They talked for hours. Nothing physical, she insisted, just words. But afterward, her voice began to weaken. Some notes wouldn't come out at all. She went to doctors, but they found nothing wrong. No infection, no strain, just silence. "I think he did something to me," she whispered. "I think he took a piece of me, and he's coming back." That was all I needed to hear. Sirens don't always live in the ocean anymore. They've learned to blend in to live among people. In the old days, they sat on rocks and sang sailors to their doom. Now they walk into clubs, whisper promises, and steal voices one conversation at a time. Sirens are thieves, but they don't want your money. They want your essence, the very thing that makes you special. In Kellyanne's case, it was her voice. Do you remember anything else? His name? What he looked like? I asked. She hesitated, thinking hard. He was tall, a dark suit, no tie. His eyes were strange. Not the color, but the way he looked at me, like he already owned me. That description fit. I told her to stay at the club, keep the doors locked, and not to speak to anyone she didn't recognize. Then I went back to my room and dug through my bag. Like I said, this wasn't supposed to be a working trip, so I didn't have much. But I had a few essentials: my travel kit, some old tokens, a charm or two. And I had the two most important things: a small tin vial of salt water from a place I can't name, and a silver-framed compact mirror I'd carried since my first missions. Sirens are vulnerable to salt water. It reminds them of what they once were. And silver reflects them not as they appear, but as they truly are. I returned to the club just before dawn. Kellyanne was alone on the stage, her scarf off. She was trying to sing, but only air and effort came out. He arrived just a few minutes later. He didn't knock. He simply walked in as if he owned the place. The moment he crossed the threshold, the room grew cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Kellyanne froze, her eyes wide with terror. I stepped between them. "Evening," I said. He looked me over, calm and smooth. "You're not her manager." "No, but I am what you'd call a problem," I replied. The siren smiled, a charming smile meant to disarm, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I only take what's freely given," he said. "She didn't know what you were," I countered. "It doesn't matter. A deal's a deal," he insisted. I raised the vial and tossed the salt water at his feet. He hissed, his skin steaming where it splashed. He took a step back, and that was all the time I needed. I held up the silver mirror and spoke the verse, an ancient tune I'd learned decades ago from another hunter who had gotten too close to a siren, but survived to tell the tale. The siren stumbled, its human form flickering. The illusion peeled away, revealing what it truly was: a thin, long-limbed creature with black eyes and fingers like eel bones. It tried to lunge at me, but it was too slow. I slammed the mirror into its chest, and it vanished in a crack of sound and a scent like salt and rotting lilies. It was over. 2 days later, I filed my report with the association. They marked the siren as neutralized and flagged the region for increased monitoring. Louisiana has always been a hotspot, but lately things have been getting worse. Creatures are showing up more frequently and not always where you'd expect them. This time I wasn't reprimanded. Technically, I was on an assigned case, but they did send a follow-up note asking how I had managed to banish the siren without my full kit. I didn't reply. Some things don't translate well into official reports. Kellyanne made a full recovery. Within a week, she was back on stage. I stopped by the club before I left town and caught her show. Her voice was strong, clear, and effortless. Again, the kind of voice that makes an entire room fall silent just to listen. After her set, she found me at the bar. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me and nodded, then wrapped her arms around me in a real heartfelt hug, the kind that says more than any words ever could. Then she kissed me on the cheek, smiled, and said, "Thank you, Sam." I tipped my hat, said goodbye, and walked out into the night. Some jobs stick with you. That one did. The next case took me farther south than I had ever been. It was a hot, flat, and wide open country, the kind of place where the sun feels closer to the ground than it should. There were dry dirt roads and endless fields of corn and wheat worked by generations of the same families. The people here live a simple life. They rise with the sun, eat early, fix what's broken, and only rest when all the work is done. There is no pretense, no pursuit of fame or fortune. They live quiet, rooted lives, Weddings happen in backyards, and babies are born in the same houses as their parents. These people grow up with the land and grow old with it. They don't trust easily and they don't complain. But when something threatens the land itself, when the soil they depend on turns strange and starts to take instead of giving, that's when even the toughest old farmer might come looking for help. Not from doctors or sheriffs, but from us. One such man was Darwin. He was older, maybe in his 50s or 60s. He was tall and lean with skin like cracked wood. He wore a white shirt tucked into faded jeans, a silver buckled belt, and leather cowboy boots that had seen more decades than I had. I met him by his barn late in the afternoon. He was leaning on a fence, chewing on a toothpick, watching the horizon as if something might crawl out of it if he blinked. "You Carver?" he asked. "That's me," I said. He just nodded as if that confirmed something he had hoped wasn't true. "Appreciate you coming," he said. I got out of my truck and closed the door. "You called the association?" He didn't answer right away, just stared down the field for a long moment, where the wind barely moved the tall grass. "Didn't call. I wrote a letter," he finally said. "A letter?" I asked. "Mail still works. I figured if what I'd heard was true, they'd send someone," he explained. "And what exactly did you hear?" I asked. Darwin still didn't look at me, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "My granddad once told me when I was a boy that there were people out there who handle things regular folks can't. He said they keep quiet travel light and show up when the world turns sideways." I remembered that. "And you think your world's turning sideways?" I asked. He nodded once. "Something ain't right with the land." I waited, but he didn't elaborate. "You want to tell me what kind of not right?" I pressed. He finally looked at me, his eyes like dark glass. Not scared, not even nervous, just tired. "You'll see," he said. He turned and started walking toward the fields, and I followed. As we walked, I noticed small details. Rows that should have been perfectly straight were crooked. There were patches of ground that looked burned, not black, but pale and lifeless. The corn stalks twisted in unnatural ways. "You don't use chemicals out here?" I asked. "Nope, just sun, water, and time," he said. "And these marks?" I asked. "Ain't from me," he replied. We reached the edge of the main field and Darwin stopped. Dead center was a perfect circle where nothing grew about 20 feet across. The dirt inside was cracked, dry, and gray. "It showed up last week. Wasn't here before. Now it won't go away. Nothing grows in it. The ground's wrong," he said. "You tried digging?" I asked. "My shovel snapped clean in two," he replied. That got my attention. "You think it's natural?" I asked. Darwin gave me a flat look. "Son, if I thought it was natural, I'd be sitting on my porch with a beer, not talking to a man who looks like he lives out of his truck." "Fair point. How long has it been like this?" I asked. 8 days. It started with the dirt going pale. Then the livestock got skittish. A couple of them ran off. My dog won't go anywhere near it. I crouched at the edge of the circle and ran my fingers lightly over the soil. It felt bone dry, as if it hadn't seen moisture in years. "Has anything come out of it?" I asked. "No, not yet," he said. That last part was not comforting. "All right, I'll take a closer look," I said, standing up. Darwin didn't thank me, just nodded once. That was his way. I don't know how he knew about us, but I've found that the older people are the more secrets they've collected about this world. Some from books, some from whispers, and some just from paying attention. Darwin had seen something once, or someone had told him something, and he'd stored it away like a tool, waiting for the day he might need it. That day had come, and now I was here. Darwin didn't use the word haunted. He called it plagued. He said the land was sick and that it felt watched. I'd heard that before. Most people avoid the word ghost until they have no other choice. That night I stayed on the farm. Darwin offered me a spare bedroom, but I chose to set up on the porch instead. I wanted to hear the land, to listen to how the night moved around it. It didn't take long. Just after midnight, the crows appeared. Not normal crows, not the ones that show up after a storm looking for worms. These were something else. They didn't land. They just circled the edges of the field screaming. Loud, sharp cries that made the wood railing tremble. I counted at least 30 of them, maybe more, all circling the dead patch, watching and waiting. They were crow demons. They're not demons in a biblical sense. You won't find them in scripture. These things are more like twisted spirits born of deep pain, murder, or betrayal. They roost in trees, claw at buildings, and feed on suffering. You only find them where something terrible happened on the land that was never made right, never forgiven. By morning, the crows were gone, but their destruction was evident. The barn roof was torn in places, crop rows were shredded, and a metal tool had been bent in half and left sticking out of the ground like a warning. Darwin didn't say much when I told him what they were. He just nodded and spat in the dirt. I figured, the birds have been wrong since the first frost. I asked him about the land's history, not his time, but before that. He looked away, then back at me. This farm used to be a plantation a long time ago. I found some old records, once ledgers, names, dates. I burned most of it. Didn't feel right keeping it. I nodded. You didn't cause this, but the land remembers. And that was the core of it. Crow demons don't just appear, they are drawn to buried hurt. This place had experienced pain that was never reconciled. So I got to work. I spent the next 3 days on the property. I didn't get much sleep and didn't leave the fields. I walked the perimeter with a compass marking where the crows had perched at night. I dug in certain spots, soft patches, where the dirt felt warmer than it should have. Near an old oak tree, I found a rusted chain buried under 6 inches of soil. That night, I began the ritual. Cleansing land is nothing like cleansing a house. You can't just light some candles and say a few words. It requires real work, special tools, deep knowledge, and a lot of patience. I built a small fire in the center of the dead circle, adding dried sage cedar chips. In the pieces, I had dug up bones, metal bits of broken pottery, artifacts from a time that still resonated too loudly in the soil. Then I began the chant. It was an old language I'd learned from a healer in Georgia years ago, with words that sounded like wind through reeds and didn't fit easily in the mouth. They weren't my words, not really, but they had been passed down to me, and I used them as best I could. The first night, nothing happened. The second night, the crows came closer, screaming louder. Some even landed on the edge of the circle, but they couldn't cross the line, not with the fire burning and the chant continuing. Darwin watched from his porch with a shotgun on his lap, though it wouldn't have helped. On the third night, everything changed. Just before dawn, the crows dove in a full swarm, black wings blotting out the sky. I thought they would overwhelm the circle, but the fire surged. The ground shook. The artifacts burned bright and hot, and the scream the crows made as they were forced back didn't sound like birds anymore. It sounded like pure evil. They scattered all at once, rising high and vanishing into the sky like smoke from a chimney. Then there was silence, a deep, real silence that presses against your ears because you hadn't realized how loud everything had been until it stopped. The land exhaled. I stayed up until sunrise. When the light touched the field, the dead circle was gone. In its place, tiny green shoots were already beginning to rise. Darwin walked out slowly, his boots crunching on the dry grass. "That's it?" he asked. "That's it," I said. He looked like he didn't believe me. Then he looked at the field, at the new green growth, and something in his face shifted. His jaw relaxed and his shoulders dropped. "Thank you," he said. I packed up my things later that afternoon. He offered me a meal, a place to stay, and a bottle of something strong. I politely declined. The next day, I sent my report to the association. I included the standard details, what I found, what I did, and how I handled it. But I also added a personal note at the end. I told them the truth: these crow demons were not like the ones I had faced years ago. They were more aggressive and smarter. They moved with a clear purpose, as if they knew who I was before I even stepped onto the field. That wasn't normal. I wrote what I had been thinking for a while now, that the creatures we deal with are changing. Year by year, decade by decade, they are getting stronger and meaner. The patterns are shifting, and I no longer believe it's a random phenomenon. The association didn't argue. They didn't offer a theory either. Their only response was short and direct: accelerate recruitment. Start training younger hunters now. Prepare for a larger field presence in the next 10 years. Whether that move will be enough or even the right one, only time will tell. I'll continue to write in this journal. As long as I have ink and time and hands that can still hold a pen, I will keep adding stories to these pages. God knows I have a few more in me, maybe even another decade if I'm lucky. The world hasn't stopped spinning, and the things in the dark haven't stopped moving, so I won't either. Not yet, but I'm not blind to the truth. I know I'm getting older. My sideburns have gone gray. My knees creak when the weather changes. After a long run, it takes me a full day to feel right again, which wasn't the case 20 years ago. Back then, I used to bounce back faster. Now I need ibuprofen and a nap. And yes, retirement is on my mind. I think about it sometimes late at night when the work is quiet and my gear's put away. I imagine a peaceful place not too far from town. A small shop with a window at the front and a bell that rings when someone opens the door. I've always loved pizza. In college, there was this little joint right off campus, greasy slices, cheap beer, sticky booths. We spent hours there talking about classes, life, and things we thought we understood. I think I'd like to open a place like that. Simple, warm, something steady. Maybe I'll call it Carver's. Maybe not. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that I'm not finished yet. There's still work to be done. Still things out there that need to be dealt with. And as long as I am able, I will do it. I owe that much to the people I've helped and to the ones I couldn't. And to you, whoever you are reading this journal now, remember something important. There will always be something in the dark. There always has been, but there will always be someone standing in its way too. Maybe it's me. Maybe it'll be you. The point is, someone always picks up the torch. That's how the world works. You fight until you can't, and then the next person steps up. That's the deal. Evil doesn't sleep, but neither do we.